everyone sit down so we can start? Good afternoon, everyone. First, I want to start with an administrative announcement. On your programs, there was John Ryan, who was supposed to chair this session. Unfortunately, he got pulled away, so I'm afraid you're stuck with me. I'll try and do my best. My name is Andrew Amato. I'm one of the heads of disease program at the European Centre for Disease Control in Stockholm, Sweden. Some of you know us. We work entirely with infectious diseases, so I'm very pleased to be here because this is a subject close to my heart, and I'm sure it's close to many of yours. I'm also very pleased to see antimicrobial resistance being given such a high profile because we see it as one of our priorities. And I'm sure you know this, but one of our estimates is that AMR causes 33,000 deaths per year in the European Union. That's almost 100 a day. And one of the estimates I've seen recently is that the actual cost is close to 1.5 billion euros a year just due to antimicrobial resistance. But I won't sell this audience. I'm sure you know these figures. I just want to, before I introduce our excellent speakers, I just want to draw your attention. Some of you may know this session is part of what they call the co-design process, which means the Commission is currently preparing a strategy for how to implement Horizon Europe, and you are being asked to give input into this strategy. So really, we are here to listen to you rather than you to listen to us. So please do take advantage of this. The Commission is in listening mode. That's not always the case, as some of you may know, so please take advantage of that. One of the main objectives of this session, I'll just read it out to you, just to remind you, to receive stakeholders' feedback on how to achieve a targeted impact to address future needs of research and innovation in this area, taking into account also the global challenges and perspectives. Okay, I won't drone on more in my introduction. My pleasure to introduce the first speaker. It's Barbara Kirstens from the Commission, who will summarize another aspect of the process, that the consultation, the online consultation. Barbara.
Thank you. And let me start also by another administrative reminder. This session is being web streamed. So we were referring to co-creation. Co-creation for the implementation of Horizon Europe. And we put out an online consultation for individuals across Europe to give us their thoughts about what kind of impact they would like to see to achieve a fairer and sustainable Europe. And this consultation is still ongoing. We close it the 4th of October. So if coming out of this session you would like to still contribute, please do so. So from the more than 6,000 replies that we have received so far, 35% of those that replied indicated that they saw that impact on health was important. And I won't go into the details of the colors, but in general, addressing the burden of infectious diseases through more effective services was something that really was felt as being important. And this gives you a bit the frame. So 35% of the respondents thought that health research could be an answer. Many of them thought that addressing the burden of disease was important. And some of the questions that struck us when analyzing these preliminary results was focus on prevention. People thought that prevention was very important. What they also said, we need to address the issues of inequalities. Infectious diseases pose a burden to society as a whole, but you have certain groups that are more vulnerable to these infectious diseases or more stigmatized because of these infectious diseases. And that's where people thought research might give an answer. So I won't go any further. I will hand over now to the next speaker.
Thank you very much, Barbara. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Marie-Paul Keaney. Dr. Keaney is currently the Director of Research at INSERM in Paris. She has a number of hats. I won't mention them all, but one of her perhaps most recent has been Assistant Director General for Health Systems and Innovation at the World Health Organization. Dr. Keaney will give us a bit more of a background on the subject before we go to listening to your input.
Thank you very much. It gives me great pleasure to have the opportunity to talk to you. It also gives me great pleasure to hear that the feedback that the Commission is receiving from when they ask member states their opinion about the new Horizon Europe program, that two words are coming very strongly, which are inequity, fighting inequity, and we have one, access. Access to medicine, affordable treatment, available treatment for all. And this is really something that indeed in my more policy days that I had in WHO were very important. So I have been asked to put on these slides what I think would be the big challenges and therefore the big investment which is needed in the area of AMR and infectious diseases in the coming program. So of course it's difficult to summarize such a huge area in only a few bullet points, but I've tried this and couldn't end with less than 7. So my apologies for that. So of course we need, and this is my first bullet, we need research and innovation on diagnostic, anti-infective treatment vaccines, but also on non-pharmaceutical means to control antimicrobial resistance or AMR, as well as zoonotic re-emerging and re-emerging infectious diseases. I think here, while we all focus on the fact that we need new antibiotics, it's also important to stress that we also need more research into non-pharmaceutical means also to control antimicrobial resistance. The antimicrobial resistance crisis is not an antibiotics lack crisis. It's also about antibiotics badly prescribed, about antibiotics entering in the environment, and we need to focus on the whole problem and not only a small part of it. Now, in terms, I wouldn't want to miss, indeed, the big pandemics, HIV, TB, malaria, but also joining into that viral hepatitis as well as neglected tropical diseases. For these also, not to the same degree for all these types of diseases, but we need research and innovation on biomarkers, very important, on diagnostics, anti-infective treatment, vaccines, prevention, and as well as non-pharmaceutical means, because we need to support the sustainable control, according to the disease, control, elimination, and/or eradication. Not to forget, when we get out of biomedical research, we need also more human and social science research relevant to all these diseases. My number 4 was for the exploration of a role of host genetic factor on disease severity and also on control and modalities to control sepsis. My bullet point turns on research to improve standards to support innovation. Indeed, we need to have more effective, efficient innovation. And these will deal with quality of medicine, avoidance of counterfeits, but also more research on pharmacokinetic, pharmacodynamic model of animal models, on bioinformatics, and of course on artificial intelligence. We need also, and this is very important, we need research, and this is mainly social and human and social research, to understand and encourage public acceptance of vaccines. Apologies. And finally, we need also research to understand how management of intellectual property and business interests might best be addressed to avoid that this becomes bottleneck for access to new products developed through public funding. Now, of course, I can't cover all this broad field, as you can imagine. So what I've chosen is to give a few examples showing that actually we are not starting from scratch. And Horizon 2020 has already planted the seeds of what we want all collectively to achieve under Horizon Europe. So my next slide will be here to give you some of the recommendation of what we should be trying to do in terms of antimicrobial resistance. And these are the recommendation of the Interagency Coordination Group, IAIG, which is a UN group on AMR, which are related here on research and innovation. So in agreement with what we all want to do, they advocate that the world in general and all the funders should increase investment in innovation in quality assured new antimicrobials, new compounds, diagnostics, vaccine, but also waste management tools and safe and effective alternatives to microbial. And this should be in a One Health context for human, terrestrial, and aquatic plants, animals, and plant health, as well as implementation for this of operational research. They also recommend that the world should promote and support equitable and affordable access to any product which is being developed. And finally, they recommend to strengthen implementation and operational research and research coordination and collaboration in a One Health context. Coming closer to the European Union and to the European Commission, one of the opportunities that we have is to build on successful initiative of Horizon 2020. One of those is the GPI AMR, Joint Program on Antimicrobial Resistance, as well as on other initiatives. So the GPI AMR, he is united 27 countries to together tackle AMR. It has developed a strong AMR strategic research and innovation agenda. And in collaboration with the Commission, it is funding research in member states in order to address all the areas that have been identified which are in need of research. In the area of emerging and re-emerging diseases, I have chosen to present to you two initiatives. One, which is a global initiative on which I worked a lot when I was still at WHO, which is the WHO R&D blueprint, which has identified a number of priority emerging diseases or re-emerging diseases, and which has developed a roadmap for all of those, saying what it is which is key and which must be pursued as research as a priority. On the other side, we have a Horizon 2020 initiative, which is called GLOPID-R, which is an initiative to bring together all funding agencies which are interested in this area to try to see whether there is a way to match the needs and the key research initiative which needs to be conducted and the funding, so that we have a better alliance of the funding of priorities and funding capacity. Finally, we need also, as you all know, we need to address specific pandemic influenza challenge, because we all know that although the last pandemic hasn't been so severe, the next one could be very severe, and therefore we need our research and innovation also in this area. On this, we need to research to better use existing influenza vaccine. We need also to develop, if possible, what is called universal vaccines for influenza, which is more of a holy grail at these dates. And we need, importantly, also to go back to more academic research to understand the rules of immunity through broad collaboration projects, such as the one that I mentioned here, but it's not the only one, which is the Human Vaccine Project, which has currently also a European arm, which is to decipher and to decode the human immune system. So as you see, there's plenty of work in front of us. For this, we need all the energy and all the research means of the European member states. We need all the funding that the member states can put on the table for this research in order to improve through research the health of the citizen. And we need all the support that we can of the European Commission. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marie-Paul, for a very nice overview. I think that sets the scene. Now we come to the discursive part, where I'm very pleased to introduce my colleague, Professor John Arne Rettinger, who's the Chief Executive of the Research Council of Norway, with a very strong background in infectious disease and epidemic preparedness. He will be moderating the next part, where we will be listening more to you, but it's a structured moderation. So, John.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to be here and do this together with you, because now we have the questions and answers session, and that's not run in the way that we normally do, where you ask questions and the panel answer. Now it's actually the open questions, and you come with new questions and new comments and you answer. So this will be run now for the rest of this session, but we will have an interactive discussion here, and then finally have more of a wrap-up where we will also ask you to vote on and give your opinion on the totality of feedback. So you can also start logging into Slido as we enter the last part of the session. But the Commission has identified 3 questions that we will focus on in this discussion. 1, 2, 3. And we'll spend 10 minutes on each of them. And first is, what type of research and innovation should be prioritized to enhance efficient prevention in order to decrease the burden of infectious disease in Europe and globally? So this is an open question to you. It addresses the issue of priority that came up as an important sort of issue for those answering in the stakeholder dialogue. But what are the type of our research and innovation that should be prioritized? So I open up for comments. And what we can do is to just turn around to your neighbor and think for 30 seconds and comment. Let's do that. 30 seconds with your neighbor, and then we open for the floor.
Just raise your hand so we can give you a microphone.
You have one here already.
Very good. That got you going. So we'll now get some comments from the floor. So please.
Could you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Santi Rojo from Lampe University Hospital in Spain. I would say that maybe 2 interesting points to start will be the use of antibiotics in farming animals. Maybe that could be done in cooperation with the mission on soil health and food or something like that. And other point could be also interesting to improve measures to monitor antimicrobial resistance in hospitals, in tertiary hospitals, because there are quite a favorable environment to the rising of superbugs, so-called that. Thanks.
Thank you. And then we have one almost at the back.
Yes, my name is Jonathan Lamprecht. I work for the Swiss government administration. What we hear often from researchers is that they need actually data for prevention to predict well what's going to happen in the future. And I think there I see a fundamental issue that you really need to sensitize citizens that giving the data is essential. And there I see a problem that the trust in the data industry is shaking at the moment. And not all citizens are willing to give their data to commercially driven companies. So the question is there an alternative? How can we build trust, and how can we get the data we really need? And I guess there could also build on synergies with Cluster 3 if it's about pandemic prevention. Yes.
Thank you. Then here on the 3rd row, and then on the 5th, and then one here.
Andrés from the National Institute of Health, Carlos III, Spain. To my opinion, we need, regarding the first question, to have intervention trials, because we need to have not only interventions, but we need to have evidence base that the measure that we are trying to implement is working. This is one thing. The other is that, of course, we need to have more data, but there is already existing a huge collection of data. What it is necessary is to make it interoperable and to make access to that data. Of course, it is sometimes difficult because there is also the protection, because it's human health-related data, but this is also essential. That means data mining. And last but not least, it is also to keep in mind that it is necessary also to put the different capacities together, because still in Europe, still there are silo mentality. For instance, regarding the infrastructures, many people don't know that exists the S3 infrastructures for clinical trials or for translational medicine or for omics data. And it is necessary to put this full capacity in full operation, and with all the actors working together in a comprehensive, aligned exercise. Thank you.
2 rows behind you. Thank you. You have the mic.
Thank you very much. I'm with the TB Alliance, a product development partnership doing research in new treatments for TB. I think a couple of things come up here. One of them is there's a lot that's happening that's already good. And I would want to mention EDCP as an example of that. I think clinical trials is an essential piece of funding that is required from the European Union, from the Commission, to decrease the risk that is there for doing research in fields including AMR, including TB, including other global health diseases, also to enable work in access that Madame Keaney very clearly described. Also, the need to do efficient trials is very important. Therefore, global partnerships like the EDCP are extremely important. So for us, that's a very essential piece that needs to be taken into account for the next strategy.
Thank you. And then second row here.
Thank you. My name is Matina Agliba. I work for Institut Mérieux. So I think in the fight against infectious diseases, and especially AMR, when we talk about the prevention, the early and rapid diagnosis is very important for efficient stewardship and antibiotic susceptibility testing. So this has been a lot neglected so far, and I think there is more research to be done in that domain. And also I would like to support the idea of electronic health records and to better take into account this data and information in order to predict outcomes. And maybe it could also be an idea to include this important topic of infectious diseases and AMR also in the mission on climate change, because I think we have to keep in mind that infectious diseases will probably increase due to climate change, including also waterborne, foodborne diseases that we haven't touched on up until now. So the whole chapter of food safety is also very important and to be taken into account. Thank you.
Just pass it behind you, and then you will get the next, yeah.
Thanks. I'm Jenny Blair. I'm from an organization called PATH. We work globally to develop products, drugs, vaccines, diagnostics, specifically to treat poverty-related and neglected diseases. I think for us, we've seen, in large part because of support from the European Union, a lot of these products are advancing through the pipeline, and more products are going to be in that late stage clinical trials, and so ensuring that which everybody knows are the most expensive, and so ensuring that there's support late stage to actually get these products through the pipeline and then out to people who need them. We really see that as key as we look to kind of what's next.
Thank you, and then.
The BEAM Alliance, which is an association of companies, of SMEs in Europe that work on this issue. We have now over 60 members and over 120 different projects of diagnostic and therapeutics and non-medical interventions that are targeted to solve the problem of antimicrobial resistance. I think a lot of wise words has already been said about priorities. Our plea to make sure that the instruments by the Commission are inclusive. And with that we mean that first of all it is important that patients are involved in the design and the execution of the projects. Also that we work on awareness of this problem with the public, because antimicrobial resistance is not so much known with the general public as, for example, problem of climate change. And we also feel that it is important that the instruments are inclusive in terms of the entities that can participate. One of the speakers in the introduction introduced JPI AMR as an instrument, but in fact in a lot of countries private entities are not eligible to receive funding from JPI AMR. There's a lot of activities of new developments in IMI, for example, that's very much driven by larger pharma companies and an agenda set by the FPA. So our plea is really to make a public-private collaboration and make sure it's inclusive.
Good, and one more there. And then I think we have time for one more if there is.
Yep, cheers.
Good afternoon. My name is Spring Gombe. I work for the Drugs for Neglected Diseases Initiative. I suppose it goes mostly to question 3, but I feel there should be an explicit reference to the fact that infectious diseases affect children primarily and that technologies should be developed that are child-friendly. In our area of work, we see in some of our diseases, 70% of the people affected are small children. In sepsis, that is also the case, obviously. And yet the technologies aren't developed in a way that is specifically addressed to children.
Good, and the final.
Yeah, it's on.
My name is Alva Finn, and I work for Save the Children. And just to agree with the last point, pneumonia is actually the biggest infectious killer of children worldwide, but it's very deprioritized and has been deprioritized generally, including in EDCTP. So we focus a lot on the price of vaccines. There are only 2 providers of vaccines globally for PCV. So we would really like the EU to start investing in pneumonia. If we're going to be dealing with decreasing the burden of disease, infectious disease globally, then we need to take on pneumonia. And another area that we're very far behind in is oxygen supply. We need sustainable oxygen supplies that can keep going in hospitals that are in rural areas. And I think this is a kind of no-brainer if you want to stop preventable diseases like pneumonia. Thank you.
Very good. And in a way, we have already started sort of discussing the next question, which was mentioned. But we'll do it now. And so I open the floor for the question reading, what are the most important and urgent research and innovation activities to address inequalities caused by the burden and spread of infectious disease and then thereby build healthy and fair communities in Europe and globally? So this is about addressing inequalities that can come as a consequence of infectious disease. But I guess the relationship could also be the other direction. So do you want 30 seconds to think? Look at your neighbor. Is she or he smarter than yourself and have come up with an issue?
Yeah, one. Yeah. Well.
Okay,
so some of you definitely decided that the neighbor was not smarter. So just, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. I think that
silence, order.
Technology is there already, and products have been created but never used. Many universities have a variety of test on chips. I think one key tool to address inequality is to see whether distribution of test on chips and primary care could help early detection of clusters, for example, at low cost. And of course, if this is connected to a proper, and I don't know whether that exists, system to identify clusters, this would certainly help out. And would be, as would be cheap, would be at point of care, would be not requiring sophisticated labs. And as I said, there are, especially for viral diseases, there are a number of those lab on chips in practice. I think this would be very important, would be very useful.
So you said products that were not used, or?
Products, yes, small nano chips or labs on chips.
Yeah, okay,
which are cheap on top of being cheap.
Yeah.
That could be
cheap chips.
Cheap chips, correct.
Good.
Identification, that is where the expenses would be.
Yeah. Thank you. Others? Third row here. Thank you.
Hello, Rosa Castro from the Federation of European Academies of Medicine, and I think one of the things that is mainly needed here is to include all, to be more interdisciplinary. So if we want to address inequalities, which are a highly complex issue, the R&I activities should be as inclusive as possible. And the second thing is to involve the communities. If we want to build better, healthier, and fairer communities, there needs to be more involvement on that side too.
Thank you. Yes, next to you.
Yes, hello. My name is Gavin Conrad from the University Hospital in Aachen. I guess we have a lot of diagnostic available, and we invented a lot of diagnostic. At the university, we have access to all different kinds of methods. We can deep sequence and identify actually every bacterium, but the private practice, for instance, does not have access to such methods, and so they do not apply diagnostic. So we should implement diagnostic also in the private practice and support private practices to have access to all these diagnostic tools to find infectious disease agents and resistance, of course.
Yep, and two behind. Yep.
Thank you. I want to complement something that's said by the previous speaker on new innovations that are not used. I think one of the issues is with the R&I agenda being very focused on the innovation itself and then sort of move to either the health or development agencies for rollout. There is a massive gap between available new innovations that have been recently improved and the time it takes for them to actually reach healthcare settings in Europe, but certainly also globally. So I think a dialogue between sort of dev, health, and RTD, especially in the field of global health, is essential, and the strategy there has been long overdue. And that in itself will help think through this pipeline and making sure that new innovations are quickly there, which are there to reduce inequalities.
Thank you. First row and then second.
Thanks again. I think, I'm not sure it's part of this, but it's important to develop research to understand the movement against vaccination. I think it's important to understand who draws people to distrust vaccines, or even in the other side. I mean, I come from a country with a strong public system, and we have vaccines that are paid by the public service, others that are not. And this causes a lot of distress in families, because obviously we are mostly talking about children, that what should I do? I take this vaccine that is not covered, so I have to pay it, but it is so important. Why it's not covered, or is it not covered is because it's not important. I think we have to address how we give information to people and how people receive the information about vaccination.
Thank you. Okay, we'll one in the back and then second row here. Please.
Yeah, hello. My name is Matthias Reiter-Pasmandi from the Austrian Ministry of Science and Education and Research. And I wanted to follow up on the points that were already made on interdisciplinarity and on non-technological innovations. I think in many of the issues that were raised before, expertise has to be brought into the projects from, for instance, social sciences disciplines that need to be addressed in an explicit way. So, for instance, the anti-vaccine movement was mentioned before. Austrian researchers from, for instance, the political science and even historians look into this, historical anti-vaccine movements from the first areas when vaccines were introduced. And also in the field of inequalities, expertise from this range of disciplines is key to addressing the challenges. But if you are in the field of health research, sometimes you have to explicitly address those researchers and those institutions. So this has to be kept in mind when programming holistic approaches. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, second row.
Yes, I think there's the whole question of access also when we talk about inequalities. So maybe there is also a need for doing more health economic outcome studies in order to demonstrate the real value of tools and products. And another interesting tool of the European Commission, I think, is also the innovation procurement, pre-commercial procurement and innovation procurement that maybe could also be continued or accelerated in the future. And then all the question about value-based procurement, how to demonstrate the value. I think this is related to health economic outcome studies, but it's important to think about. And when I think about Ebola, for example, or these diseases, I'm also wondering about if there couldn't be a regulatory process to accelerate the access to innovative tools. I think it exists for vaccines, but it doesn't exist for diagnostics, for example. So if Europe could think about an accelerated process to get these new tools quicker to the people who are in need.
Thank you. Are there more comments? If not, I think we move to the next question. So next is, what are the trends and novel technologies that research should capitalize on and prioritize to develop new tools and solutions to tackle infectious disease and AMR? So new trends and novel technologies. Floor is open. And we can also here start with 30 seconds break. Discuss with your neighbor.
Should I summarize all of them?
Good.
Hello,
yes.
We'll
start in the back.
I'm Garto from Techniker and also from the EUMAT Materials platform. I think that the surface technologies are very interesting, like texturing or coatings with nano addition of antimicrobial properties could be a solution for reducing infections, for implants, and also for including antimicrobial properties for increasing lifetime of food in packaging, for example.
Thank you. So that was surface technologies, material science. Yep.
Yep.
Good.
So, Iraida Loina from Ciretec. We were leading a project starting in 2014 related to nanotechnologies and key-enabled technologies for the use of formulation of nano antibiotics. There were at that moment 3 projects funded at the same time. I think that there were some nice results arose from that. And we are at the moment trying to implement or developing new nano formulations with antibiotics to do targeting, to reduce the toxicity of antibiotics and improve the efficacy and diffusion of the antibiotics in biofilms. So I think that's something that what we are working on.
Thank you. Yes. First row.
So my name is Jean Langs. I'm Sanofi Pasteur, but also representing Vaccine Europe private sector, R&D. In vaccine areas, you know, the new emerging, exciting technology is mRNA, but at the moment I speak, no one knows whether it will be a real breakthrough. There are a lot of very enthusiastic PowerPoint. And just to illustrate John Arne and Marie-Paul and Barbara, I have a question inside the private sector because we have the capability, and you say it's important to define the most important urgent to priority, and you put Europe and globally. So what is the balance in terms of future Eurozone Europe between infectious disease that are relevant for Europe and infectious disease that are outside Europe, such it was mentioned, neglected tropical disease? Where should we focus and where there, because if you say it's all equal, no, because at the end there should be priority. Resources cannot be spread too thin.
That's a good question. Noted. Yes, please.
Remke van Leeuwen from the Beam Alliance. Also to follow up on the gentleman from Vinovi. I think we can, if we do our best, make a whole wish list of novel technologies. But what matters is how they're being used in the field. And I always like to give the example of the gene expert for TB diagnosis, which in controlled situations is a beautiful instrument. But when you put it out into real-world practice, the performance is really different. So focus should not only be in developing new technologies, but also make sure that they're implemented in the right way, very much in line with the words that are highlighted in bold in the second question.
Good. No one has mentioned artificial intelligence. Please. Yes, please. Thank you.
Ken Vernick from the Research Infrastructure on Insect Vector-Borne Disease, InfraVec2, and the Institut Pasteur. Insecticides are increasingly being delisted for use, particularly in Europe, because of health concerns, and the pathway for the development of new chemical insecticides is going to be pretty steep and essentially not very attractive for industry. And so one of the potential avenues would be to prioritize the development of new ecological, durable, and essentially green forms of insect control, including insect vector control, that could be based on biological control measures, might also be genetic, but in any case, that would be based on means that have histories of success, but would not generate the kinds of negative health consequences that we can see from some of the chemical insecticides now.
Good. Yes. Yeah. Please. And then.
Gavin Conrad's University Aachen in Germany. So we are in the omics area. We can deep sequence genomics, microbiome, metabolome, and everything. But we can hardly make sense out of the data, and no one has the time. And here comes the artificial intelligence, because we have to combine both deep sequencing, as deep as possible, and we will have soon all the technology for this. But this has to be combined with artificial intelligence and expert systems and worldwide clouds of experts to make sense, biological sense of the deep sequenced data.
Thank you. Then behind you, and then I open for one more comment. That's kind of you, but please, and then one more.
So my colleagues in drug discovery tell me there's great application of AI for drug discovery, early stage drug discovery, hit to lead. But at the same time, it raises a lot of questions, because we know that the populations that we're working with are particularly vulnerable. There are ethical implications about what is done with the data that arises from that, how we merge sets of data without informed consent. So that there are a number of questions that come up that we're only now beginning to explore. So the science alone, fabulous potential. The ethical consequences, nobody knows.
Good. And the final question?
Yes, Xavier Gainza from Bioquality. Our experience is about nanolipids, micronanolipids, formulation of colistin and tobramycin. We have very good results and about efficacy with resistant pseudomonas and other kind of bacteries. And also very safe aspect with this kind of non-formulation. And then the next step for us is go to clinic in this moment.
Thank you. Very good. and rich input. And now we will actually ask you to sort of comment back on the feedback. And the way to do that is that I have the daunting role to try to summarize your comments, and then we will sort of write that up as the main outcome of each part of the discussion, and you can vote and indicate what is most important to you within each of the questions, if I have understood it correctly.
Yes, that's exactly it. So you have to download the app B2Match. I think some of you have used it in other sessions. Jan kindly asked, indeed, to take on the task to try to summarize the key highlights of what the answers were to the different questions. And we will ask you to vote. So we will first summarize the key highlights so that the colleagues at the back can type them in. And then you will have an opportunity to vote. The last question will be, did we miss anything? And if so, what? And that's the opportunity for you to write. We won't project it on the screen because from previous sessions I've seen that people write a lot, but that is something that we will keep and use in our analysis. So open question at the end, voting in the beginning. Jan-Arne, over to you.
Thank you. So the first issue was really about prevention. And if I try to summarize, some of the topics were related to use of antimicrobials. So understand antimicrobial use both in the food production system, animals, and in the healthcare system. Understanding use of antimicrobials. Then there was an item related to increasing access and sharing of data. A third on the need to test the effectiveness of preventions. And not to, because we couldn't have too many. So I think the last one is I think we will include diagnostics, susceptibility testing, and the access to those technologies. So that didn't cover all what was mentioned, but at least some. So can we bring that up on the screen, or how do you do it?
We can do it afterwards. You said say the three, you go to the next, sorry.
Okay, I thought we'd do each one of them.
Oh, well, it's there. Okay.
Yeah.
So you will see on the screen, on your screen, if you downloaded the app, what kind of RNI should be prioritized, and you can start voting. If you scroll down the screen, did you have 4 options? 3?
There were 4.
I can't see them.
So we seem to, yeah, but so we'll stick to 3. It's that's the limit of potentially the limit of the technology. So after the Horizon Europe, we will probably have 4.
Yes, sorry.
That's fine.
Yeah, just to say that as there will be an open question towards the end that you write in, you can address that.
Absolutely, yeah. So if we just summarize, which seems more or less to have a stable set of priorities: early diagnosis, susceptibility testing, just ahead of better data on prevention and access, so including effectiveness studies, and then the third, the use of antimicrobials, antibiotics. Very good. So move to the inequalities session, and I'll try to then select three sort of main issues. And I want to actually include one on that specific question on when we say infections that are important for Europe and globally. So maybe let's say that addressing infectious disease of poverty as one, because that would be a clear indication of sort of a priority. That's one issue. The second is understanding social science drivers for both, and understanding social science, or using social science for understanding implementation gaps, scale-up gaps, anti-vax movement, and things like that. And then finally, better evaluations and procurement mechanisms to secure access. And that will be a sum on economic evaluation, value-based procurement, accelerated approval processes. So that they are now writing this up. Yes, and then you can answer.
No, c'est pas ça. It's not true. Non-technological innovation. You don't have disease of poverty.
Okay. So I'm not sure who's in charge.
The first.
But I like to be in charge.
So colleagues at the back, can you encode the summary that John made? If not, then...
Okay, we'll go for this and we'll see whether we have time for a final one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm used to negotiating texts on infectious disease in the World Health Organization. Then normally we have the text on the screen as we discuss. So it's harder to sort of do it like this, but we'll make it. Yes, that's correctly observed, and we'll come back to that.
We'll come back to that. Just bear with us. This is the first time that we use the technology, and we have to get it fine-tuned. Also, this is a co-creation session, so your voices have been heard, it's being recorded, you will have the possibility to react on the app, and more importantly, you can still contribute to the public consultation, open until the 4th of October. And I'm sure that once you get out of this session, you will have new ideas, so it's the ideal opportunity to contribute.
So, on this, we have sort of access to technologies as the first priority, the use of social science to better understand different issues, the lack of scale-up implementation, lack of vaccination, and then linked to that, I guess, also non-technological innovations. So we'll move to the third area, and that is the novel technologies, novel trends. And I suggest, but I'm not really sure, will you now code what I say, or how should we do it? Yes, good, very good. So I suggest 3 issues, 3 potential priorities. Nanotechnology, material science as one. ecological vector control as the second. And then ethical use of data samples from the field. I know I skipped some, but that was since we only have three. We have three. So let it go a bit more so that we see whether it's stable. But we will collect answers, as Barbara is saying, until the end of the session, and also afterwards. So it's currently more or less an equal split between green sort of vector control, new technologies there, and how we use both data and samples, and then nanotechnology and material science being the last among these. Do we have time for a final question on related to sort of poverty-related disease or not? Or is it possible to implement one more question?
The system has been coded in such a way, and it's too complicated to say.
Yeah.
So the next question is the open one, no? Yes. So please project that one. So this is about, did we miss anything? And you can say poverty-related diseases if you want. And it's open for your comments. And you can type them in your app. And like I mentioned to you, we will keep this, we will analyze this, but in addition, you can still reply to the consultation.
So this is a free text comments, and we will collect all of them. So very good, Barbara. Will comment on how this will be used.
Well, so we will read through the different sessions and what has been contributed, and Joanna made a suggestion whether we could maybe make a word cloud of it. So we will see what is feasible, and certainly we value your contribution. It's coming, so giving you time to think is productive. Yes, I turn it over.
Very good. So I thank you for your comments and contributions, and I give the floor back to the chair.
Thanks. I think we managed to keep the time really well, and I want to thank you all for your contribution. There's nothing much else to say, but the process isn't closed when we finish this session, remember that. So there's still plenty of time to put in your suggestions, and please do take this opportunity. I want to thank all the speakers, the Commission. I think this was very well organized, and I want to thank your contribution and your involvement. And I wish you the rest of the day, good rest of the day. Thank you.